This morning, I'm going to do something some of you were used to hearing every Sunday, and that is the Sunday Daily Word. So if you will, put yourself in a relaxed position. You may, of course, close your eyes as I read today's Daily Word from Unity. I am a steadfast spiritual seeker, steadfast. No matter where I may be on my path, sometimes my spiritual life feels easy, and sometimes it feels hard. There are times I enjoy new insights, blissful clarity, and peace. Other times, I may struggle, feeling stuck and directionless, or even lonely on my walk with God. At times like these, I deliberately renew my commitment to my personal spiritual journey. Although my attention wandered, the divine presence within me has always remained steadfast, as near as my next thought. I strive to pattern my own steadfastness after that of God. Wherever I am in space, time, or consciousness, I discover the love, the strength, and the wisdom of God by reconnecting and knowing we are one. Our scripture this morning is taken from Psalms 139. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the seas, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. And so it is. Thank you once again for being with us this morning. And welcome to all those who are on Zoom. We opened our Zoom link early, and we had a nice conversation before this service began. And of course, that Zoom link will remain open for a bit following the service so that those of you who are linked in can have a chance to chat with one another and to catch up. For those who are joining us on YouTube, we invite you to subscribe to our talks and to like Unity of Charlotte YouTube channel. That helps you and others find our channel. And of course, we look forward in the future, hopefully not too distant, when we will be able to gather again in person. We do have on our regular Sundays when we are in person, a great program for children and teens. So if you come to visit with us when we resume, please bring the children and grandchildren with you. Also, Unity has a marvelous worldwide prayer ministry. So if you or anyone you know is in need of prayer, you can place a prayer request through our website, unityofcharlotte.org. Our prayer team is always ready to join with you in holding you and your loved ones in prayer. You can also call Unity's telephone prayer ministry. We call it Silent Unity, and it has been going on for more than 100 years. Call them at any time of day or night. Just dial 800 now pray. That's 800 now pray for personal affirmative prayer. Now, there are four announcements for me to make about Zoom meetings and gatherings, just in case you are interested in continuing to deepen your journey and your study of unity principles. You may go to our website, unityofcharlotte.org, and find the Zoom links there. Do not be disturbed if our website says it's not safe, because it is safe. We're sure it's safe. So just proceed to utilize our website, unityofcharlotte.org, and don't concern yourself about that particular announcement. It's just temporary. So one of the things that you will find is that today at 1 p.m., Reverend Jim Fuller, will be hosting a discussion of a book on our book club. That's at 1 p.m. today. And the subject is Dr. Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul. The Untethered Soul. And there will be another book selected for the next meeting that occurs in November. Also, we have regular, ongoing virtual classes. One is Affirmative Prayer and Meditation. This group is facilitated by Barbara Rolfe. It meets Tuesdays at 7:15 p.m. So when you go to the website, just look for Affirmative Prayer and Meditation Group in order to access the Zoom link. We also have the favor of Barbara Rolfe's leadership on a Wednesday class called Dialogue as Service. This occurs between 10:30 a.m. and noon. Again, access the Zoom link on our website for Dialogue as Service. And we also have an ongoing study of A Course in Miracles that is facilitated by Alan Batten. Alan is the producer of this show, as many of you know, and he makes sure that our services are accessible via the internet. And he's a very experienced producer, and we're just blessed for him to be helping us. So A Course of Miracles takes place every Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Again, you may access the Zoom link on our website. So I believe that these are all of the announcements, and it is now my pleasure to introduce you to our minister for today. She is very popular among our membership, and it is Reverend Sally Robbins. Reverend Sally.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for setting the tone for our service this morning. Isn't it wonderful that we can come together in spiritual community, even despite the fact that we cannot enter our building and we're trying to be safe? We know that the technology is totally supporting us. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can say our affirmation for this week, if everyone can see my screen. So let's say this together. My prayer life is my connection with God's abundant good. Living in a limitless and loving universe means that unlimited good is always available for me. My daily prayer life is the key that opens the doorway through which God's limitless good flows to me. My prayer life is my connection with God's abundant good. And so, as I unshare now, I would I'm going to start a video, a music video, that will be a wonderful introduction into my talk today. My talk is called Calling in the Sacred. And so I'm going to start this video, and we'll be able to, it's called Everything is Holy Now. Some of you may have heard this before. It's by Peter Mayer. He's a wonderful musician, and this song is very special. I've chosen the video that actually has the lyrics, so you can follow along with the lyrics, and it will be a wonderful dovetail into my talk. So let me share my screen again so that we can show you this video.
When I was a boy, each week on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And when I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad. Miracles don't happen still. Now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, better magic trick said anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. Now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second rate hand me down, but I walk it with the Reverend there, 'cause everything is holy now. Testament, that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird. shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But I walk it with a reverend air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Everything is holy now. Wow. Alan, can you please mute the Unity of Charlotte? I'm getting an echo there. Thank you. So everything is holy now. Isn't that a fabulous way to start our Sunday? That seeing a little red bird, I love that lyric. I saw a little red bird, just like a shining, burning bush, made him want to bow his head. Just to have that sense of awe and wonder, to know that everything is sacred and holy and absolute perfect divine alignment. That's the wonderful way that we can start the day when we move into the relishing of just that which is sacred. And that's my topic for today, that calling in the sacred. We're going to talk about what is the sacred and how do we protect that? How do we revere that? So I'm going to start with a story. You know how much I love my stories. And this comes from author Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. Many of you saw the movie that was developed into. And she said this at a 2019 conference. She said, the great mythologist Joseph Campbell, who spent his entire life studying the religions of the world, was asked, what is the definition of sacred? And how do human beings make something sacred? He responded, it's the simplest thing in the entire world, and you do not need a priest for it or anybody else. Anybody can do it. Here's how humans make something sacred, he said. You draw a circle around it, and you say everything inside this circle is holy. It's sacred because you said so. That is called a boundary. And a boundary is not a wall. A boundary is not something that you hide behind. A boundary is a golden circle that you draw around the things that matter to you. And you say everything inside this circle is sacred. If you treat it with respect, you are allowed to come in. But take your shoes off and bow, because you are coming into the center of holiness here. And if it's not, and it's outside, then what do we say? We say, I do not care. That's a wonderful revelation from Joseph Campbell. And Gilbert goes on to say that this is a reminder that we decide what is sacred in our lives. And just as we can know that everything is holy, just like we heard in that wonderful song, everything is holy now, that only a few things of our choice get to be sacred. Do you understand the difference there? Everything is holy, but we get to choose what is sacred. We get to choose what is pure, what is worthy of our protection. Because if we don't do that, if we say that if everything is sacred, then all we do is we dilute our energy and we get burnt out. We get stressed out. We're all worried and nothing gets our full attention. And I think this is a really important distinction for us to make, that we can make everything holy in our lives, but what is the sacred few things that we are going to revere and protect? That's what I want to focus on this morning. Because when everything is sacred, nothing is sacred. There's no way that we can make that distinction. So today I'm going to explore what is sacred to you. I'd like you to be thinking about that. Dr. Rick Hansen shares that the word sacred has two kinds of meanings. First, it can refer to something related to religion or spirituality. But second, even more broadly, it can refer to something that one cherishes, that is precious, to which one is respectful, even reverent, dedicated. And so a couple of things that maybe we can think of as sacred, he goes on to say, is honesty with one's life partner, old growth redwoods, human rights, the light in a child's eyes, or longings for truth and justice and peace. Those are some things that we can hold sacred. So what is sacred? What inspires awe with us? What invokes a feeling of protection, like we really want to make sure that this is protected? What is revered by us? What do we approach with a sense of reverence? A sense of something holy? And what have you drawn a circle around and declared as sacred? And a really wonderful clue to that is, what do you hold sacred? What are the things that matter most to you? What do you spend the most time with? What are you actually focused on, putting most of your energy into? That's a big clue as to what you find sacred. There have been times when I put way more time into my job than I should have been. And I was distracting myself with what should have been sacred with a job, which was important in its own right. But it didn't draw the distinction that that was what was sacred to me. And yet that's where my priority was. That's where I was focused, most of my energy. So what are you putting most of your energy into? And how are you protecting that, making sure that it stays sacred? So what maybe we can even turn this around and say, what should you make sacred in your life? Like, I had to really think about that. What should I be making sacred in my life rather than the distractions of the world? Oh, it is so easy to get distracted. So how can I treat the things that should be sacred in a more kind and respectful way? So when it comes to the circle you create, Gilbert says this, and let me share my screen again, and we'll talk about what she says. So Gilbert says this. I think I went forward a little bit. She says, you get to decide what is sacred. The sacred thing inside the circle can be your time, your creativity, your loved ones, your privacy, your recovery, your values, your mental health, your activism, your joy, your very heart and soul. And then she says, you yourself can stand at the center of a sacred circle that you drew around your very being, your very own being, and say everything inside this circle is holy, not because you think you're better than anyone else, but because you have humbly accepted stewardship over the divine and mysterious gift of the universe that is you. Oh my goodness, when I read this, I thought, am I treating myself as sacred? Am I treating this body, this divine essence, this goddess Sally showing up in the world? Am I treating that as sacred? And unfortunately, too many times I allow myself to get run down and tired and aggravated and all these things. And I'm not showing myself, I'm not treating myself as sacred. And so I love how Elizabeth Gilbert really focuses in on that we have to be part of that too. We have to be a part of that holy sacred circle, or it's just not going to work. And when we get to that place of seeing that I myself am not treating myself as holy, how could I treat anything else as holy? And so when we are looking at what is sacred in our life, are we including ourselves? Of course, we're going to put our loved ones. Of course, we're going to put our family. Those things that really mean a lot to us. Let's put ourselves in there too. Let's define that we, this holy spiritual being that is absolutely perfect, simply because we chose to show up in this universe. We chose to incarnate and say, yes, I'm going to be here as the God being that I am, as lively and as pure and as wonderful as I'm supposed to be, and as connected to my source as I can be. And that is holy and sacred. So I encourage you this morning, if you, like me, haven't been giving yourself enough time and due diligence in giving yourself that sacred space and holding yourself as holy, what else can we make sacred if we haven't done that with ourselves yet? This is a really key point. I think Western culture is not very good about creating that space for ourselves. So let's remember that this morning. And then the second thing I want to talk about is, what about our sacred work? I alluded to that earlier. What within the scope of what comes up in our day-to-day world, and we're all very busy, what is our sacred work to do? Sometimes our sacred work gets mistaken for the busy work of what we're here, and we get caught up in. I know myself, that's a big issue for me. How can I make sure that my sacred work is getting done? And I'm going to talk about that in just a second here. But I'm going to start that with a story too. This story comes from Jeff Martin's. It's a great story. Long ago, there was a village in the high mountain valley led by a holy man. He was a master. And each day the people would consult with the holy man to see if there was anything that they needed to do for that day. One morning, they were all gathered and meditating in the stillness of the town center when the master spoke. And he opened his mouth and he said this: "We need to get rid of all the roosters and chickens." The townspeople looked at each other really concerned. "But master," they said, "the hens give us eggs and the roosters protect the hens. They provide us with food and wake us up early in the morning and to start our day's work." The master just smiled and said nothing in reply. In the end, it would be up to the people whether or not they would act on his advice. And after a brief discussion and prayer, the people decided to follow the master's suggestion, even though it seemed counterproductive. For the next several days, they traded off the chickens, gave them away, or ate them until soon all the coops were empty. The very next day, the master spoke to the villagers again. "We need to release all of the dogs and send them clear of our village." Now, this time, the people were even more concerned, and they said, "But why the dogs? They give us companionship and protection. They warn us of thieves or dangerous animals or that are companions. They're companions to our children. What possible good can come from letting our dogs go?" But the master would only smile and shrug, and he didn't say a word. With his message delivered, it was now up to the people to decide what to do. So after consulting with each other and checking out whether it felt right, they decided to follow the master's advice, and they cleared the village of all the dogs by setting them free or giving them away to families and outside of the village. In 1 week's time, there was no dog to be found. And the next day, the master spoke a final time. He said, "We need to douse all the cooking fires completely by this evening." A great moan followed this suggestion. "But master," the people said, "our fires keep us warm and they cook our meals. We start future fires from the coals and the embers of yesterday's blaze, and without those embers, we have to work a whole lot harder to get our fire started. What reason is there for putting out such a valuable resource? Is it not enough that we've already given up our chickens and our dogs? Who will feed us? Who will protect us?" "Who has protected you and fed you up to now?" the master replied. So the people gathered a final time. After a great debate, they finally came to the conclusion that they would follow the suggestion that the master said, and they doused all the fires, even though it seemed to be creating even more hardship. By this time the sun set, all the fires were extinguished and everyone went to bed. Early the next morning, a marauding army of thieves crept up onto the nearby hills at the crest of the ridge and looked down into the village. They carefully studied the village. All the huts stood dark and silent before the sun rose. Not a chicken was stirring. There was no sound of barking of dogs. Smoke, there was no smoke. There were no fires going. Everything was still, completely still. The leader of the thieves was extremely frustrated. He said, "This place is deserted. Let's move on to the next town." I love that story because many times that the work that we're being given direction by Spirit, the ideas, the simple inspiration that we get from Spirit sometimes seems to make no sense at all. And we think, why would I do that? That's counterintuitive. That's counterproductive. It doesn't make any sense at all. I remember when I was living in Phoenix a few years ago, and the inspiration came to me, move to North Carolina. I didn't know anybody in North Carolina, had never lived in North Carolina. It made no sense whatsoever. And it wasn't like I was going to a job. It was clear. Move to North Carolina. So I immediately started making preparations. And of course, once I got here, everything started falling into place. It made perfect sense that I was to be here in North Carolina. And so I have learned to listen even when it makes no sense at all. I obey because there is a bigger picture that Spirit sees beyond what I can see with my human eyes. And so the sacred work that I've been given to do sometimes doesn't even make sense. Sometimes doesn't when I tell people this is what I'm going to be doing, they're like, why? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what others think. It only matters what I have been given instruction to do by my sacred inner self. Does that make sense? By that spirit, that indwelling spirit within me that is always guiding and directing. And so this story is so perfect in that the master kept telling him to do several things and it made no sense whatsoever. And yet, once the thieves came over, it made perfect sense. The village was safe because they had done these things. So do you know what your sacred work is? Are you listening to that indwelling presence? And even if it's not making sense, are you following through on that? You never know how your world can open up in just like that by saying yes to something that you have been given inspiration, even if that inspiration is make a right on this street, even though you've never gone down that street. There are many times when we have to let go of what we think is best and listen to that sacred part of us that is so tuned in and so aligned with what is our highest good. Sometimes we miss our best because we're in the midst of our good. Don't ever let your good get in the way of your best. And sometimes I have to know that my best is what Spirit wants for me. When I'm still dwelling with, oh, this is pretty good right now, I've missed the best because I've totally ignored that sacred yes to what is happening within me. Then I have to take that and turn that into outer action. This is a really important point. The sacred work that is ours to do is so vital to the mission of what we're here to do on this planet. So can you tell the difference between your sacred work and your busy work? Do you know what it is that you're supposed to do? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells the warrior Arjuna about holy work which he describes as sacred action. Sacred action. Now, sacred action is the work that stands before you, and it doesn't make sense typically. It doesn't make any sense at all. Getting rid of dogs and chickens and putting out fires requires a faith in something other than the external appearance of things to help us venture into the unknown. Are you willing to take a step into the unknown? That's what sacred living is all about. Living on your growing edge and saying yes to, wow, that doesn't make much sense, but I'm going to give it my best. That's what sacred action is. It's unique in this way because an individual experience for each one of us, it's because it's inspired. It's inspired. It comes from a place we don't even know. And we can't point to that and say, well, it looks terrible on paper typically. Getting rid of some of my things and picking up and moving from Phoenix to North Carolina made no sense on paper. And yet it was the perfect right thing to do. Staying in that sacred, holy space, allowing your higher yes to come through, takes great courage. Living this life, this spiritual life, takes great courage. And the other thing about sacred action is it's always in the present moment. It's always do this now. Don't wait. I read somewhere that we have like a 90-second window sometimes when inspiration comes to us. We have 90 seconds or it's gone. It's on to something else. If we don't take it seriously and go, I need to really think about this. Another way I recognize sacred action is it shows up in my life twice. If I haven't listened the first time, if it shows up a second time, I know I'm supposed to do something about it. Sometimes that's even, someone will mention a particular book and then someone else completely unrelated will say something about it. Then I know that's Spirit's way of going, take a look at this. There might be something in there that you need to understand and read. So what are we listening to? How are we responding to that divine inspiration that comes to us day in and day out if we simply listen? Sacred work, sacred action is the work that God has given you in this moment. And no one else can do your work. There's things that only I can do on this planet. There's things only you can do. And that you have a special and unique set of skills and circumstances and resources that provide you with the capability of doing something that none of us can do. And if we miss that moment, oh my goodness, there's no one else that can take your place to do that sacred action. It is ours to do, ours to do. I want to share my screen again and show you another quote. This comes from the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita has some wonderful life lessons in there. And let me move down to that. So here's what the Bhagavad Gita says. The world is in the bondage of action unless action is sacred. And what he means by that is this, that we can be bound simply by the busy work of our lives if we're not willing to bring sacred action into the forefront. You can be bound by the busyness of the world. That's so easy. That's so easy. And so the Bhagavad Gita reminds us, make sure that what you're doing is the sacred action. Everything else takes care of itself. Everything else moves to a place of divine understanding, divine patterns, divine moving forward in this world. Now I can hear someone already saying, Reverend Sally, how can the mess in this world right now be sacred? Right? I certainly asked that question. How can this world, what is going on around us, how can that even remotely be sacred? That's a fair question. Well, let me relate a story by Martha Beck. My final point here today. I don't even know what time of day it is. Martha Beck has a great story. And she talks about the samurai sword. And she says this: for centuries, the most sophisticated technology on earth was the Japanese samurai sword. To make these swords, artisans would melt tons of sand, extracting a bit of metal so rare and pure that it was called jewel steel, Jewel, jewel steel. And they'd take a block of this extraordinary substance and they would heat it, then they would cool it, then they would fold it, then they would beat it with hammers, and then they'd repeat that whole cycle all over again. Heat it, cool it, fold it, and beat it for months on end. The blade that was created by this whole process, which was a long process, had over 1 million individual layers of steel and virtually no impurities. It was light enough to feel like an extension of the samurai's arm, sharp enough to cut a hair floating on water, and flexible enough to bend almost double and spring straight back, strong enough to slice through a bale of hay in a single stroke. That's pretty sharp. Many such swords are such exquisite works of art and craftsmanship that they're revered as national treasures. The moral of this story is that when the universe wants to create something exceptionally beautiful and useful, it takes the finest material available and then beats the ever-loving crap out of it for a long time. The benefits of this: if you feel like 2020 has been beating you up with a hammer again and again and again, I think many of us would fall into that category. Maybe, perhaps, that is simply the universe's way of creating these multiple layers, these beautiful, wonderful, individual layers of courage and strength and beauty and wisdom, things that we could not have accessed any other way. Maybe the universe is making something so sacred, what looks like is nothing like sacred, is turning us into the most sacred vehicle we've ever been. I want you to think about that. Think a year ago, which seems like 85 years ago now, because this year has been so long and so packed with change. Think a year ago, last October, and how much you have grown, how much you have moved from a place of complacency almost, because we were taking a lot for granted before. And now we take nothing for granted. Now we are in the midst of changing into something, metamorphosizing into something so beautiful, so wise, so perfect for where we are right now. We're just like the samurai sword. And even though it feels like someone is beating us and that we just can't withstand any more blows that life is giving us, if we just hold on and know that this is a sacred process and that Spirit is using us for a higher presence, a higher work, a more sacred action in the world, I'll take the beating. Give it to me. I'm ready. I'm ready for Spirit to use me in a way that makes me more sacred, more valuable, more in the image and likeness of that which brought me here. So the samurai sword is a perfect analogy of how each of us might be going through the slings and arrows of life right now, going, I just don't know if I can hang on any longer. I've had many people say that to me. I'm not sure if I can hang on any longer. This is too much. And yet they do. And that on the other side, we can look back and go, oh, that's what that was all about. Oh, I get it now. We don't have the luxury of that at this point because we're still in the layering and beating and hammering and folding and heating and cooling, and all of that is still happening to us. And who knows how much longer it may take. And yet I do know this, that you are here for a divine purpose, that you are here to do something so incredible that only you can do it, that there is something that is happening within your psyche, within your very soul, that is changing you from the inside out, and that is allowing you to step into a greater purpose for which you were born. And this process is perfect for you. Even if it doesn't look like it, even if it seems like, I can't take this, it's too much. Take a breath. Know that you can take this. Know that you can reach out to our prayer line here at Unity of Charlotte anytime, and that we will stand with you to help you through this process. And know the truth of your being, that you have every ounce of strength you'll ever need. You have every ounce of wisdom you'll ever need. You have everything within you that you need to get to the other side, and then some. You just haven't accessed it yet. And this is allowing us to access a place we have not touched before in our very soul. What is sacred? That place within us that is so perfect, pure, and untouched. That place that knows the truth of who we are, even when we're in the midst of, I don't know if I can do this. That's the sacred part that we get to draw the circle around and know that we can protect that and come back to that place again and again and again at the perfect right moment when we need it. You may be the very helpful, encouraging word that someone else needs to get to their other side. That's what community is all about, that we come together and we speak words of affirmation to each other and go, I know this is hard, but I know you can do it. I know that this is challenging you in ways you've never imagined before, but you've got what it takes, and God's got you on this. That's what I'm here to tell you today, that the sacred part of each one of us, that sacred action that we're committed to, the sacred work that is ours alone to do, that's what we're here to explore, to define, and to do. Not just to think about it, we do it. We say yes to it and take action. I want you to think again about where you were a year ago. And I can almost guarantee each one of us can say that we're sharper than we used to be. Just like that, the blade of the sword, we're sharper than we used to be. We're more flexible than we used to be before 2020. I can definitely say that. You're far stronger than you used to be. Yes, everything is holy now. What is sacred to you? What are you saying? Yeah, this is hard. This is challenging. But this work is so sacred to me. Showing up is sacred to me. And being God as Sally, God as Lawrence, fill in your name. God as you is the sacred, most wonderful part of this world. And your beauty, your song adds to the symphony of what is going on in this world. This universe needs you. This time and humanity needs you. It needs you strongly right now to show up as courage and kindness and compassion. All of those things are so needed. That is your sacred action. That is your sacred work. So I'd like you to, I invite you to just think on these things this week. What is sacred to you? What is holy to you? And how can you show up in your most sacred, beautiful, radiant self? Let's take that into prayer. Let's take a deep breath in and cleanse all that we've processed. And we let it out. Father, Mother, God, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to serve humanity this morning. I know that each and every ear that has heard this morning is now transformed in a way they have never imagined before. Those who entered the call at the beginning of this service are now different than they were when they started this call. Those who are listening on YouTube, anyone who has listened for any portion of this message is now a different being, is now moving to a higher level of consciousness, to a higher expression of living, and knowing that the God self within them is their co-pilot on this journey. I know that each and every one of us are now listening, carefully listening to our soul, what is ours to do. And as this week unfolds, the inspiration will come freely and effortlessly, and we will act on it accordingly. I know that what is sacred to us, that golden circle that we've drawn around, we will put into it that which is truly sacred and protect it and revere it and hold it as sacred. I know that each and every one of us are moving to a higher expression of being right now. There is a quickening, there is an awakening, there is an absolute yes, a full-bodied yes to that which has transpired. And I know that each one of us is saying, I am here for my highest good. Spirit, let me see what that is. Give me the spiritual eyes to see, and I will act. And so I know that the sacred journey that we've been on this morning, even as it comes to a close with this service, will now move on into our daily lives. We will go about our day today with a kind word, with an inspired way of being, knowing that we are encouragers of others around us, and that we turn back within to that space, that holy space within that is always encouraging us. God's always got our back. And so I simply let go, knowing that as we have shared this morning, there is just a deep resonance with where two or more are gathered, there is the great I am. And so that very reason of us coming together, of knowing the truth for each other and the truth of ourselves, is yet alone another reason for us to say yes to Unity of Charlotte, this wonderful, magnificent institution to which we are all drawn to, which we get our inspiration from, that institution where we are in community with each other. What a wonderful place. We're grateful, and we know that all is unfolding for our highest good, including this community. And so I simply let go and know that each and every one of us has been brought up to a whole new level of being, to an awakened sense of living, and to the vitality of living aligned with spirit. It is done. We let it be so. And together we say, and so it is. Amen. I'm just grateful for each and every one of you on this wonderful journey that we call life. And thank you for being here this morning. I'll go back to sharing my screen and move forward to our time of offering. If you've received any benefit from being in community with us this morning, and we sure hope you have, then we offer you the opportunity to close that circle, the cycle of giving and receiving, and to give back, however that may be, whether it's just a wonderful thought, a good thought about us, or if you'd like to share your financial resources. We love getting that. We wish we could pay Duke Energy with just a prayer, but they do like to get cash. So all of your wonderful gifts and tithes are lovingly taken care of by this community, and the good goes back out into our world. So I invite you, if you would like to share with us today, you can do it in one of several ways. You can either send us a check, the old-fashioned way, as my younger friends remind me. I'm still old-fashioned in some of these things. I still send checks on occasion, but we love to receive those checks. You can send them to the address there on the screen. You can find that address at unityofcharlotte.org, and you can also give online too. It's safe, it's easy. You simply click on the Donate Now button. So I invite you, if you are going to be a part of that, however you're going to be a part of that, then we will share our prosperity blessing. So I invite you to say this along with me. Joyously, I give this gift, knowing the divine presence blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. And so as we wrap up today's service, thank you for being here again. We're so delighted that you could be with us this morning, this beautiful Sunday morning. And we're going to end with our prayer for protection. So let's say this together as well. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Namaste. Have a wonderful week. You can stay on if you choose. We will be sharing. I will unshare my screen. And if you'd like to stay on and say a few words to us, just we open the forum now. So